Welcome to North Georgia Doing Business. I'm your host, Dianne Shaver, and I have the great pleasure of interviewing entrepreneurs in this beautiful area we call North Georgia. And today I have the honor of speaking with somebody who not only creates beautiful, usable knives, but he's an artist as well. So he's both things. So I want to introduce you to Bob Pickens at Pickens Forge. So welcome, Bob. It's nice to have you here.
Oh, it's nice to be here. And I thank you so much for coming into my workshop, spending the day with me.
Cool. I love that we're in the workshop. So what started you making knives? What was it that pulled you to do that?
You know, it goes back when I was younger, I used to make things, just something that was in me that I wanted to do. And I have a knife here and a knife sheath in my workshop that's about 30 years old. And then that set aside, and I didn't do any work with them for years. And when I retired about 7 years ago, then I became really in the need of finding something to do. And being a Vietnam veteran and with PTSD, I discovered that I was a workaholic for a reason. And that was to block everything away from those memories. And when I retired, it just came on me in vengeance. So I had to reinvent myself. And being an artist, I tried a little bit of art, and then I decided to start back on making knives. So it's been about 6 years now that I've applied my talents and my interest. And when I go to bed at night, I'm thinking about knives. When I wake up in the morning, I'm thinking about knives. And it pretty much takes care of that mind that I need to manage. So it's my passion. And I really enjoy doing it.
So when did you find out you felt that you were there and you could call yourself an artist? Because you've done it before, but craft is one thing and art is another. It's kind of like another step up. When did you feel you could acknowledge that in yourself?
Well, that's really, it's a big part of me, most of my life, actually. The careers that I pursued was architectural design. If you think about that, I think most architects and people in that industry are artists. And so I started that direction and also enjoyed my art that I would do. And I would pass on my art to my family. I've got one with my brother-in-law and I who were hiking one day, and we sat down and was looking at this beautiful, beautiful scenery. And we were kind of falling into the rhododendrons. And I said, I bet you some Native Americans sat right here like we are, appreciating this view that we're seeing. And so that night, I painted a picture of Jerry sitting there, my brother-in-law, peeking through the rhododendron. And it was something that I just needed to do and to express myself and express that moment and remember that moment. So it's like everything that I do with my knives, I want to make them different. I want to make them functional. And it's the science of building a knife that intrigues me the most. And so to be an artist is one thing, but to build something that's functional and masters the science and you have the tools to do it correctly, enhances it to me, because it's like a media that I'm trying to find and discover in building my knives. And it does take time. And I started taking some small videos of my work that shows some of the complex steps that I go through, because The end result is one thing, but building it and putting the structure together inside where you don't even see it um, satisfies me. So videos of the intricate parts that are inside of a knife so that someone who appreciates a knife can see and know how it's put together. And I'm prideful in doing that. And I just want to pass that on to other people to appreciate it. So,
can you walk us through the steps of creating a knife?
sure. The creation starts in my mind mostly, and I sketch it out. And sometimes I get really carried away with my sketch, and then I'm taking measurements of everything, and then I will take that sketch and then work it around to. I used to work it into a wood sample so I could put my hands on it and feel it better. But now I pretty much can look at what I'm trying to draw and do, and then I draw it out, design it, and then I start working my steel. And the steel has to be in a annealed state. That means that it's where you can work the steel, hasn't been hardened, and I have to bring it into an annealed state, and then I can hammer it, heat it up, move it like I want to, move the steel around, and then grind, and then put it to the image that I have tried to put together. And that first starts the item. And then putting in the rest of it together, if it's a hidden tang knife, that's when the tang actually goes into the handle. It's much more complex. And I have to design and have the tang that goes through the knife.
We got a little interrupted. We're going to go back to Bob creating a knife. So we got as far as the tang. So take us from there.
Okay. The point I'm trying to make is that there's a lot of details that goes on in putting the knife together, and designing it and measuring every little thing that goes together and making the right cuts and the right drills, marks in the building it is a challenge and is the fun part to me of building the knife. And of course, you want it to look good and you want it to be functional. So laying it all out and making sure everything works together. And then I disassemble the knife. And then I have to go through a series of doing the right steps on the blade itself so that it's functional and will make sure that it holds up and become an heirloom, hopefully in someone's family. And that's my whole goal. So I do have my forge here that once I get the steel kind of worked out like I want, and I need the forge to do that. And once I get it to the point that it's pretty darn close to how I want it to be, and I've already got the hidden tang added to it and everything's ready to go, then I will come to my grinder and grind some edges and bevels and get things where it needs to be. And I usually buy the 1095 high carbon steel and made in USA. And then when I take that steel and now it's ready to be hardened, then that's when I go back to my forge again and I forge it. I mean, get it up hot enough that it loses its magnetism. And then you know that you've got it down to where the steel is ready to be hardened. And at that point, that's when I quelch it, and I use a quelching oil, and it sets the hardening of the blade. And then once I get that done, then fine tuning and cleaning it up, and making sure nothing happened to it, didn't crack, didn't warp, and go through that step. Excuse me. Then I have to temper it, and the tempering is going to make it not as brittle. It's going to make it a little more flexible. So if you're using that knife, it's strong, it's hard, but it has a flexibility to it that will make it last. And now I'm moving into the process of I'm almost ready to put it back together again. Um, so once I get all of it cleaned up, then I put it back together and all the little pieces slide together, lock in, tighten it up. Then it's back in one piece. And then I go to my next station, which is the customization and making the handle unique. And then once I get it all done like I want it to be and it fits good to the hand, then it's time to go and to my other station and do my leather work. And I make my sheaths custom to the knife itself. And I want it to be unique. And I want it to also have the character or the culture. If I'm doing an antique, I do a Yellowstone series, which is elk candles, and I want the sheath to look like it's been riding on a cowboy out in west for maybe 10 years. So it has the worn look to it. And when you look at it, it looks like it's an heirloom itself that came from a cowboy. And so that's the whole concept and the idea of putting all the little pieces of my artistic ability to make the sheath and to keep the era in mind as I'm doing what I'm doing. And I do like to make a knife look worn. So when you pick it up and look at it, it's sometimes hard to tell if it's a knife that's been there for many, many years, or did I just make it? And that's satisfying to me.
Love that. So I don't know anything about your craft, so I have to ask questions like this. If somebody comes to you and wants a knife, does it have to be fitted to their hand, or is it just kind of a generic thing?
I've made several knives that I had to get measurements of the individual hand. Uh, I had one surgeon who uh, contacted me, got in touch with me, and he wanted a particular skinning knife. He was a hunter, but he wanted to use it like he does a scaffold. He's a surgeon. And so he took the lead and sent me diagrams of his hands, his fingers, and then I took those, and he wasn't too far away from my hand. And we laid out a design. I sent it back to him. He checked it, made some changes. And so, yes, it was very much customized to how he would use that knife. And finally, I sent it to him, and he called me and said, send me another one. So I think it must have worked. But I do often work with individuals. I did one knife I do want to bring up that was very meaningful to me. I had made a knife for an individual. He lives down in Florida, and he came up to North Georgia mountains, called me and said, I've got a knife that I want you to look at. And when I looked at the knife, it was a World War II K-bar type knife. His father was in World War II, and he kept that knife. And the knife was in terrible condition. The handle was broken. Uh, but you could still tell the blade that it was a K-bar World War II knife. So I was able to find the um, layout from the original design of that knife and took those dimensions and redid that knife and stacked leather the way it should have been to build it the way it was when his father had it in World War II. I put it together. I put it on a stand. I had a World War II medal that I put on the stand, and he came back up from Florida, looked at it, and he actually held on to my workbench and cried. And that was something I'll never forget. It took a lot of work, but it put it back to how his dad used it in World War II. And that's that's rewarding, and that is customizing, I think, as much as any I've ever done.
That's so phenomenal. I mean, I'm an outsider with this. I would never have thought about how it could touch somebody. So, how many different kinds of knives do you make, and who do they go to primarily?
Well, that's a great question. Um, Over the years, I've zeroed in on certain kind of knives that I would make and get tired of them and move on to something else because of my interest. But then I'd have somebody come back and say, "Hey, I want one of those knives," and I go, "Oh heck, I guess I'll go back and make some of those." And I'm kind of in that process right now. There's a knife here that I just happen to have up to show you. And this is a trout handle knife. It looks like a brook trout. And I made them a while back, and then I kind of got tired of them and I put them aside. We've had a lot of people ask about those knives. So now I'm back into making them again. And I modify them a little bit, making them a little bit different. And there's the sheath that goes with that knife. And here's another trout knife with a little different kind of sheath. It's got its own little twisting and locking holder. So those are in demand again. So I'm making them. Um, the people that are buying the knife, if I make a knife like the trout knife, I think a lot of trout fishermen that come up here in North Georgia gravitate to those and want to buy one. I get a lot of fathers who want to buy their son a knife, and they'll tell me what kind they want, and I'll make them for their sons. And I've always asked, do you want a sharp knife or do you want a play knife? And not once have I had a dad tell me to make a play knife. So they're all sharp and they go to those kids, and I hope they're being managed okay. So the the other collectors that buy my knives are true knife collectors, and they understand what goes into making a quality knife, and they know it when they see it, I think. And those are the ones I spend more hours in building them, but they seem to want that knife. I don't think that most young people are buying those knives. They're buying the trout knives, but I can't forget about that knife collector who wants a Yellowstone series knife that has hours and hours of time to build them, and they want them to. So there's a lot of different buyers. I've
Well,
got customers.
I
I've
have to
got customers.
ask you, what is the Yellowstone series? Before we go any further, you refer to it.
Okay.
I need to know.
Well, it all originated because the whole idea of Daniel's Discovery Tours, which is the parent company for, help me out, Trey, Shady Creek Expeditions, and that's where I have my knives. They take trips all over the United States. And one of the most awesome trips is when they go to Yellowstone. And they just went to Yellowstone last week in the snow. They were at Jackson Hole. And so we've done that trip too. And you just fall in love with it. And it's my dedication to Daniel's Discovery Tours and their trips that they do out west that I came up with the Yellowstone series. And to me, it's representing Old West with the elk handles, leather sheaths, worn look, um, sort of like the old Bowie knife. And so that's where that came from. And there's been A lot of people really fall in love with those. And I have customers all over the United States that I ship knives to, and they follow me on Instagram. Um, and I will produce a knife and put it on Instagram. And one of those guys will say, I want that one. Send it to me. Excuse me. And that produces a lot of my customers that aren't walking into the store. They're looking at my Instagram and they're seeing updates that I'm doing, or they may call me or send me a text message and say, I'm thinking about this knife. Can you do this? So I have a lot of repeat customers across the United States like that. And I'm honored that they call me.
That's fabulous. That speaks well of what you do. So what are the knives used for? Again, I'm a city girl, so I don't know about this. How are they used mostly?
That's a great question. And what I've discovered is that I make a lot of my knives like the Yellowstone series, and I make a mahogany or walnut stand that's, I think, pretty nice, that puts it up for display, where you can display the sheath and the knife on a nice stand. Um, those are very popular. They cost more, but people are buying them, and I'm shipping them, and they're putting them on a shelf. And they sit on a shelf, and it's something they want to just have as a conversation piece, to show the art that's involved in the knife and the attire that goes with it. And that amazes me that a big part of my customer base, that's where my knives are. And I know that I built it so he could take it out in the woods and cut it on a tree or anything else he wants to, but it's sitting in his den on a shelf. And that's one group of customers. And then I also build choppers, and those choppers are used for um, people that like to grill and work out in the yard on their deck. So those are done, and camping and hunting. I do a lot of skinners, and so those are used for those. I did a skinner for a beaver trapper and did that last year for him, and a very unique blade, which was a lot of fun. Very, very sharp. I cut myself 3 times on that particular knife. So I remember that knife well. I won't forget that one. So, but most of the knives are made to use. I have one customer in South Carolina that's a big hog hunter, and he wanted a particular knife, and we designed it together. And he keeps showing me pictures of him doing what he does with hogs. So it's it's part of the whole process of building the knife and getting feedback on its use, and confirmation that it's going the right way.
Wow. So anything to say about knife safety while we're talking about knives?
Absolutely. I think the biggest thing that we take away from selling knives is we display knives, and when the parents come in and they have their children, um, we have to watch those children as they come in, because we don't know if they're going to pick up a knife and not knowing that it's a sharp item. So we debate on how to do that, but we keep an eye on it. I think, Trey, we've had Band-Aids out once.
Yeah, one time.
One time, and that's not bad average. So you got to treat a knife knowing that it will cut you. And if you handle it correctly and you put your hand where the handle is designed and let the guards do the job, of holding your fingers back away from the edge, and cut away from you. Don't be whittling towards you. Um, this general safety items, but you've got to treat it as a very sharp item. The reason I use the 1095 high carbon steel is to hold an edge really well through heavy work. And it's sharp and it will cut you.
So what kinds of things do you have to do to keep a knife from you in good shape?
That's a good question. You need to, if you buy a knife from me, I send you a complete little breakdown of about the knife, some details on how it was made, and I give you instructions on also how to take care of it. But I suggest that you use a cooking oil as a lubricant to keep it just a little bit lubricated up. I'm not saying cake it up and make it greasy where it's dangerous, but put a small coating on it to make sure that it keeps the blade nice and clean.
So how should they be stored?
They should be stored outside of their sheath. If it came in a sheath, take it out of the sheath and let the blade breathe, and don't allow this leather sheath to give off any of the chemicals that might be in it that might harm the blade. So I spell that out in my instructions as well.
So what else should we know about knives that you create?
I think how I look at it is, I mentioned before, there's a need in me as an individual to be able to plan, visualize, and then create that item. And right now, building knives satisfies that need in me. So if you see one of my knives, or if you buy one of my knives, or you use one of my knives, know that it's a love that I have in building it. And I want it to be exactly right. And I want it to be put together where I have pride in it, and I know that it should do its job. And I really do hope that 100 years from now, somebody has a knife and it's Pickens Forge knife. And he can say, I bought this up in North Georgia, and the mountain man made it. And let that just represent itself. That's what I wish.
Wow, that's beautiful and powerful. And your love for what you do comes through every sentence. So this has been a real honor to chat with you. I so appreciate that you took the time and that you really shared your passion with us. It's very, very clear. And it is wonderful and also remarkable, unfortunately, to find somebody who is doing something that is so cohesive and coherent for who they are. So I congratulate you, and I thank you again for being with us.
I thank you for reaching out. You take care.
It was my pleasure. And thank you to our audience here on North Georgia Doing Business. And as you see with these interviews, the people here, the entrepreneurs in this area are phenomenal. And there is just so much talent here. So while you're on the North Georgia Chamber website, which is where you found this interview, please look for tools and information that can help you with your business. And maybe one day I'll be interviewing you. So this is Dianne Shaver, host of North Georgia Doing Business, inviting you to join us again when I interview another entrepreneur in these dynamic and beautiful mountains in North Georgia. Bye-bye.